So I do a lot of research on the teaching force in the U.S., and I've been doing this the last couple decades, and the demographics of our teaching force in particular. And so Leo had asked me for this project to sort of summarize what the best national data available tell us about the racial ethnic diversity of our teaching force. Is it going up or down? Sort of a snapshot. So I'm just going to succinctly summarize the national data that are in this section 3 of the report. And note that I'm taking a wide screen. I'm looking at a quarter-century period from the late 1980s up to 2012. Of course, we wish we had 2015 data, but we don't quite have those yet. So, and I think most of the city reports are a narrower band of time. So there's some differences here. And as we'll also see, I'm going to present the sort of, large-scale national portrait of changes in the racial ethnic diversity of now the largest occupation in the nation. Elementary secondary teaching is by far the largest occupation in the nation according to census. And so the changes, and then as we'll see when we go into specific cities, there's lots of variation. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to try to just limit myself to 5 or 6 points about the demographics of our teaching force. Okay. So as I mentioned, elementary secondary teaching is the largest occupation in the U.S. So for instance, there's over twice as many teachers as nurses, which is one of the other big ones. 5 times as many teachers as either professors or lawyers. It's a gigantic occupation. And over this quarter-century period, it increased dramatically in size. Often we use the term ballooning to describe this. Huge increase. The teaching force went up at over twice the rate of the student population in the country. Now that raises all kinds of questions, which I won't get into right now. I mean, why? And of course, then the question, how do we possibly pay for this? But in any event, the teaching force has ballooned in size, and then the minority, racial ethnic minority portion of that teaching force has gone up even faster. So the rate of increase of minority teachers has been over double that of white non-minority teachers. It's also increased faster than the rate of minority students in this country. Now, let's be clear here. We do not have parity. That is, that the percentage of students in our elementary secondary schools is far greater than, percentage of minority students is far greater than percentage of minority teachers. We do not have parity. But actually, there's been something of an unheralded victory going on in the last quarter century. There's been this dramatic growth in minority teachers. And that gap has actually closed a little. This might seem like heresy to you. That's what the data tell you, but there's a couple buts I'm going to get to in a minute. Also, notably, each of the major groups within the umbrella of minority has shared this increase. And that the numbers of black teachers, Hispanic teachers, Asian teachers, and American Indian teachers, the 4 main groups we have all gone up faster than white teachers, have gone up faster than students from those groups, with one exception. Indians. Indians have actually, the numbers of American Indian teachers has declined. But we should note that's a tiny, tiny portion. Less than 1% of the teaching force is American Indian, and only something like 1% of the student population. So let's put that aside. Generally, there's been this unheralded victory, this very dramatic growth. Now, there's 2 buts I want to talk about. Sort of qualifiers of this large-scale picture of dramatic growth of the numbers and percentages of minority teachers in the country. First of all, this growth is bifurcated, it splinters before the recession that began in 08-09 and after that recession. Most of this growth in the teaching force and also in the minority portion of the teaching force was in that period from the late 1980s up to 08. And at some point in there, the recession happened, and things really changed in a big way. First of all, the teaching force stopped growing as a whole. hiring slowed down dramatically, and we had layoffs in this period from '08 to '012 in there. So the teaching force itself not only stopped growing, it actually shrank a little bit. However, this change after the recession itself differed across groups. And we get into a little nuance here. It's kind of a complex picture. I couldn't fully tell you why. Some groups teaching groups continue to increase, despite the fact that the teaching force as a whole wasn't, and some didn't. So the losers in numbers were white teachers, American Indian teachers, but also black teachers. After '08, they decreased in number in this country. On the other hand, both Hispanic and Asian teachers continued to go up in number, even though the teaching force itself was declining a little. You might have questions why this is. The best I can do is hypotheses. There's immigration issues and birth rate issues and all kinds of issues because the student populations changed too. The numbers of white students and American Indian students and black students all decreased in this country after the '08 recession began, whereas the numbers of Asian students and Hispanic students both increased. So, we talk about the term disaggregation. When we start to disaggregate the big picture, we find some differences there. This brings me to the second big but to my sort of picture of large growth in minority teachers in this quarter-century period. Okay. This growth in the numbers and percentages of minority teachers is all the more remarkable because minority teachers have distinctly higher quit rates, turnover rates, than do white non-minority teachers. And this has been a continuous trend, almost entirely through that 25-year period. This is also true for each of those minority groups. Asian teachers, Hispanic teachers, black teachers, American Indian teachers, for the most part, there's some variations, all have higher turnover rates, quit rates, than do white teachers through this period. So it's all the more remarkable we've had this growth. It's in spite of the higher quit rates. The higher quit rates. There's a kind of an undermining of the effort to increase diversity in the classroom by the higher quit rates. So this brings us to a key question here, and one of my last points is, why do minority teachers depart schools at higher rates than do white teachers? And we've done a lot of analyses, fancy statistical analyses, and it's very clear, it boils down to this, the conditions in those schools. It turns out that minority teachers, and this is part of the recruitment agenda in the last couple of decades, was to get minority teachers into these hard-to-staff schools, which are predominantly urban, predominantly poor, predominantly high minority. And that's been successful. Minority teachers are disproportionately employed in such schools. But such schools often are not as attractive, desirable as workplaces as jobs. And they have higher teacher quit rates. And because minority teachers are disproportionately employed in schools with higher quit rates, they have higher quit rates, if I was clear about that. That explains it. In other words, in schools with better working conditions, minority teachers, their quit rates are no different than white teachers. And I have some data in that chapter that actually, some self-report data from minority teachers as to which aspects, which things most drove them to leave that school. There's some interesting data. And some of those things would cost money to fix and some of them wouldn't. One of them, the key one, is how much say do the teachers have, how much voice do they have in the key decisions in the building that affect their jobs? This is a key correlate. This is a management issue. This doesn't cost money to fix. So there's a tragedy here, I think. There's been huge, I'm saying somewhat unheralded success in the growth, the recruitment efforts that 2/3 of the states have to bring in minority teachers, but they've been undermined by these high quit rates. And so the takeaway, and let me finish with this, is I think the national data suggests that most of the efforts are all about recruitment, bringing in new teachers. That is a terrific thing, and there's been a lot of success. These Ford Foundation put in millions of dollars, and they should be applauded. It's been successful. But my own conclusion is that we will not really close that gap until we go beyond just recruitment and we also look at retention. It's not going to fix the problem to bring in thousands and thousands of minority teachers and have large numbers of them quit within the first few years in the job. And I will stop at that point. Thank you.